Hey there everybody, this is Steven with another Pixel for Life video tutorial. Today we are going to be creating these wooden type icons. They might not be exactly like this, but for the most part this is what we are going to end up with. So to start off, we are going to need to create this wooden texture because this is not an image. It's actually 100% with Photoshop. So this should be kind of fun. So let's go into Photoshop and we're going to create a new document. And I'm just going to make it about 400 by 400. This will allow us to scale down the texture and give it like smaller grains or whatever wood has, just to make it look a little bit different. You'll see. So I'm going to go double click this background layer just to unlock it. And wow, I got a weird brush on there. Let me just change that back to normal. Scale down that size. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to fill it with a brown color, and I wrote one down. You don't have to use this one. You can just choose whatever you want depending on how dark of a wood texture that you want. So I'm just going with AB5925, and I hope this gives me the look that I want. And then I'm going to fill this with that. I did that by clicking Alt and Backspace. So when you have that, go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise, and I'm going to add the amount to 7.1 with the Gaussian blur or Gaussian and monochromatic. Click OK. On that first layer with the noise, go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and you can see that starts to give it that wooden texture. It's looking quite nice. And I'm going to give this a blur of 26 and an angle of 90. Click on OK. And now we can duplicate this by clicking Control J. And then, okay, so now is the fun part. We are going to go over to Filter, Artistic, and Poster Edges. And as you can see, it's given us this very dark wooden texture look. And we're going to use the edge thickness of 2, edge intensity of 1, and posterization of 4. Click OK. And then I am going to change this to soft light. Or wait, maybe I can just leave it at normal. Let's lower the opacity. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I thought I had to put the soft light and lower the opacity, but I'm just going to leave it normal and lower the opacity until I'm happy with the darkness of the grains in the wood. And I'm going to have it at about, let's see what 30 looks like. I'm going to go with 25. That way it's somewhat dark, but not too dark. So then click both of these, right click, and convert to Smart Object. And if you want, you can save this. And I'm just going to name it Wood Text. Don't really need to do that, but then I'm going to create a new document, and this is going to be our actual icon. And I'm going to make this one 250 by 250. You can do whatever size you want. Our texture size is 400, so that gives you a lot of room to play with. So click on OK. And then the first thing you're going to want to do is drag and drop this smart object onto here. Close this. And now, with the larger size that this texture is, we are able to scale it down to something like that. Just until it gets to a nice look, and I think that looks fine. Let me make this a bit bigger. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is create the letter T. I'm going to just use a black foreground color. Click here, and just make the lowercase t. I'm going to scale this up, and let's change this to Arial black. And then I'm just going to make this really big because this is going to be our template. So let's see, probably a little bit bigger. Hard to scale it to the right thing. I'll just go with that. That's fine. And then above this, we're going to create a new layer, and we are going to begin making our templates to cut out on this wood texture. You'll see what I mean. So I'm going to start off with this background. I'm going to just click and click here. And don't even try to keep this even. Just make it look like it's rough wood. And then I'm going to fill it with Let me just pick a new color so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to fill that. Okay. And then I'm going to create a new one. And I'm going to keep this. No, I'm not. I'm just going to click wherever I want. Something like that. Let's fill that. Click OK. And then over to the side, I'm going to create a new shape like this. Make sure you put all these on a new layer. Alright. And then one more. I'm going to create it right here. And it's going to be this cross section. Very good. Alright, so now these are just going to be our templates so we can mask out these this wooden texture. So I'm going to duplicate this, drag it to the top, and then I'm going to duplicate it 3 times. So I have 4 altogether. So let's start off with this large back one first. I'm going to hold down Command, click this so it makes a selection. Go to this one, and then click on the mask tool, and it will hide all the background except for what was selected. So I can delete that and just keep this. And now this one, I'm going to turn this on and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. So the grain is going from left to right. And then, actually I can delete the top two. And then duplicate this twice. So then the rest of the two is going the grain from left to right. So I'm going to select this and do the same thing. Mask it. Select this one. Mask it. This one. Mask it. Delete all these. Very nice. Alright, so let's move this piece into place. It's going to go about right here. Going to rotate it. Something like that. We might have to scale that up a bit, but we'll see. This one I'm going to drag out to about here. And like I said, this one's a little bit too thin, so I'm going to let's hide this background layer, this one, and this one. And then I'm going to click here, here, and then I'm going to, oops, I clicked Alt backspace, which erased everything, and then Command backspace, which filled it back in. Alright, so we have all this. It's looking a bit ugly at the moment, but that's alright. That's what layer textures are going to fix. And so let's just get started on that. Let's double click this first one. Going to double click here, and I'm going to add a drop shadow. I'm going to keep the opacity 75. Going to change the distance to 0, spread to 2, and then this size to 4. Click OK. Or, oops, don't click OK. Go to stroke. Going to make this 1 pixel, and then a dark brown. Something like that. That looks good. And then I'm going to give it a bevel. I'm going to click on here. And then for this, we want to change the depth to about 70%, the size to 1, soft to 0, highlight is going to be about 60 down here, this right here, can change that to 60, and then shadow to 0, just so it has this white line on the side. It's kind of like a gloss line. Then I'm going to duplicate that effect to all of these by holding down Alt and click and drag. Alright. And that looks very good. I'm going to save it just to the desktop. I'm going to name this icon. Zoom out, and you can play with that to mess with the highlighting a little bit. I think it's a little too bright at the moment. So I'm going to double click, go to bevel and emboss, and just lower this down. I'm going to put it to about 55. Then duplicate it over again. I think this texture might be a little bit too big, so I'm going to double click the smart object, and it's a good thing that we made smart objects. I hope you did. I'm going to select both of these layers and then click Command T, and I'm going to scale it inwards. Oops. scale it inwards just a bit, and then save it, and you can see that scaled it down, and I think that looks better like that. So now that we have that, we can begin our shadows and highlights. So I'm going to zoom in a bit, and we're going to paint this by hand. So grab your paintbrush and make your colors black and white, and let's start off with the highlights. I'm going to go above this back right here, create a new layer, and make white my foreground color. And I'm going to just paint in a highlight wherever I want to put it. You can mess with it and see what looks good for you. I'm going to do something like that. Make a selection, select, inverse, and then backspace. And it's going to delete everything outside of that selection. Then we're going to change this to overlay, and you can see that lightened it up. And I'm just going to lower the opacity. Going to go over this layer over here, create a new layer. Let's change the layer mode to overlay, and then just going to paint, and then change my eraser to a normal eraser, and I'm just going to delete, I don't know, something like that. Selection, inverse, and delete. And then same thing here. We're just going to be doing this for every one of these, and you might have a faster way of doing it, but this is how I like to do it. And I'm just going to paint there. Selection, inverse, delete. Change that to overlay, and lower the opacity. One last time. Going to change this to overlay, and then I'm just going to paint. And that again is too much, so I'm just going to select, inverse, delete, and then go to my eraser and delete whatever I don't want. Something like that. Save it. And now that we have the highlights done, it's time to do the shadows. So the main shadows, let's start at the bottom here again. Create a new layer, and going to have black as my foreground. And I'm just going to, make sure you're not on your eraser, or else you're going to be clicking around looking like an idiot, like me. I'm just going to paint in my own shadow right here. And select here, selection, inverse, delete, and lower that opacity way down. And then above this layer here, going to create a new one, and then paint here again. Right there, back there, selection, inverse, and it's the same thing as the highlights, so you're doing a lot of the same steps over and over, but it's worth it. That looks a little bit large, so I'm going to delete some over there. And then underneath this layer, I'm going to do right there, and then right there. That looks a little bit large, but we'll see how that turns out. And you want to select this background layer, select, inverse, delete, and then turn down this opacity. And then, like I said, you can delete here just to make it a little bit neater and cleaner. Zoom out, save it. You're looking very nice. Okay, so I'm going to end this part with this. In the next part, we will be creating the screw heads and hopefully the background. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.